Secure attachment doesn't just happen because you love your baby. Every parent watching this loves their baby. That's not the question. The question is whether what you do every day is building the kind of attachment that protects your child for life, or quietly disrupting it in ways that are invisible from the outside and deeply consequential on the inside. Here is what most parenting conversations never tell you. Secure attachment is not a feeling. It is a biological system built through thousands of small, repeated interactions in the first year of life. And just like any system, it can be disrupted, not by cruelty, not by neglect in any obvious sense, by 7 very specific habits that loving, well-meaning parents repeat every single day without any idea what they are actually doing to their baby's developing brain. I am not talking about bad parenting. I am talking about the kind of parenting that looks completely normal from every direction. The kind that gets no warnings in any hospital handout, no mention in any prenatal class, and no coverage anywhere, despite decades of research documenting exactly what it does. Stay with me through all 7, because number 5 is the one that stops parents cold, not because it is dramatic, but because it is something almost every parent does in a completely innocent moment. And the research on what it builds in the baby's nervous system is something you will not have heard before. And number 7 is the one I want you to hold carefully because it is the hardest to talk about and the most important thing on this entire list. This is not about guilt. Guilt changes nothing. Understanding changes everything. Let's go. 1. Responding to the cry, not the baby. This first one is subtle. So subtle that it doesn't look like a problem at all. In fact, it looks like exactly the right thing to do. Your baby cries. You come. You pick them up. You feed them. You change them. You rock them. You do everything a responsive parent is supposed to do. And yet, if you are responding to the cry as a problem to solve rather than a signal to understand, something is missing in the interaction, and babies can tell the difference. The research on this comes from Dr. Mary Ainsworth, whose decades of work on mother-infant interaction produced one of the most important findings in all of developmental psychology. Ainsworth identified that what separates secure from insecure attachment is not just whether parents respond, but how sensitively they read what their baby is actually communicating before they respond. Sensitive caregiving, in the research definition, means noticing the signal before it escalates to a cry. It means recognizing the difference between a hunger cry and an overstimulation cry. It means responding to what the baby is actually experiencing, not just quieting the noise. The ASPE summary of infant attachment research is precise on this point. Responsive and consistent, sensitive caregiving results in secure attachment. The word sensitive is doing enormous work in that sentence. When you consistently respond to the symptom rather than the communication, when the goal is stopping the crying rather than understanding what the crying is about, your baby's nervous system learns something specific. My signal produces a response, but not necessarily the right one. I am heard, but not fully understood. And over hundreds of these interactions, the difference between being quieted and being understood begins to shape the quality of the attachment bond. What to try? Before you move to fix the cry, pause for 3 seconds. Ask, what is this particular cry telling me right now? Is this hunger, overstimulation, pain, loneliness? That 3-second question changes the quality of everything that follows it. 2. Inconsistency. The habit that creates anxious babies. This one is the most documented habit in all of attachment research, and it is also the most unavoidable because every parent is inconsistent. The question is how inconsistent and what kind of inconsistency. Here is what the research shows, and it is specific. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Summary of Infant Attachment Research states it plainly. Inconsistent, unpredictable responding, ignoring the signal at times, being intrusive at other times, responding sensitively on occasion, apparently fosters anxious, ambivalent attachment in babies. Anxious, ambivalent attachment. Let me tell you what that looks like, because most parents only see the behavior without understanding what is underneath it. The anxiously attached baby is the one who is hard to settle even when you come, who escalates even while being held, who seems to need you desperately and resist you at the same time, who cannot use you as a secure base because their nervous system has learned that you are unpredictable, sometimes available, sometimes not, and therefore they must stay on high alert at all times to make sure they don't miss the moments when you are. That hypervigilance is not a personality trait. It is a nervous system adaptation to an unpredictable caregiver environment. The baby is not difficult. The baby is rational. They have learned, through experience, that the only way to ensure care is to escalate and stay escalated. Ainsworth's original strange situation research showed that the mothers of ambivalently attached babies were not cold or neglectful. They were inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes withdrawn, sometimes quick to respond, sometimes slow, sometimes attuned, sometimes distracted. No single interaction was damaging. The pattern across thousands of interactions was what shaped the baby's nervous system. What to focus on? You cannot be consistent every moment, but you can build islands of reliability into your day. A morning routine that happens the same way, a bedtime sequence that never varies. Within those predictable structures, your baby's nervous system gets what it is always looking for, evidence that you can be counted on. That is the foundation of secure attachment. 3. Intrusiveness. Too much of a good thing. This is the one nobody wants to talk about because it involves love. Specifically, it involves too much love expressed in the wrong direction. Intrusive parenting, in the attachment research literature, refers to a pattern of interaction where the caregiver consistently overrides the baby's own signals, pace, and communication in favor of the parent's own agenda for the interaction. It is not aggressive. It is enthusiastic. It is the parent who keeps engaging when the baby has looked away, the parent who escalates stimulation when the baby is already at capacity, the parent who turns every quiet moment into an educational opportunity, the parent whose love expresses itself as constant input, constant engagement, constant more. And the research on what this builds in a baby is surprising. PMC neurobiology research on infant attachment is explicit. Intrusiveness and unpredictability both fall under the category of parenting patterns that disrupt the infant's developing ability to self-regulate and that alter the development of brain areas underlying emotion. Intrusive caregiving, the research shows, is associated with insecure avoidant attachment, the baby who seems independent, who doesn't seek comfort, who appears not to need the caregiver. But here is what that apparent independence actually is. When a baby's signals are consistently overridden, when their bids to disengage are repeatedly ignored, their nervous system eventually learns something devastating. Signaling doesn't change what happens. My gaze aversion doesn't create space. My fussing doesn't reduce the stimulation. My attempts to regulate are irrelevant, and so the baby stops signaling. Not because they are secure, because they have learned helplessness. The baby who no longer reaches for you is not independent. They are a baby who has learned that reach. Thing doesn't work. What to practice? In your next play session, follow your baby's lead completely for 10 minutes. When they look away, you look away. When they slow down, you slow down. When they signal enough, you stop. That practice of following rather than leading is one of the most powerful things you can do for the quality of the attachment between you. 4. Parental withdrawal, the quiet rupture. We are at the point in this list where things get harder, because this one is not about doing something wrong. It is about not doing something that your baby desperately needs. Parental withdrawal in the attachment literature refers to a specific pattern identified by Dr. Carlin Lyons-Ruth at Harvard Medical School, one of the most important researchers working on disorganized attachment in the last 30 years. Her research, using a coding system called the ambiance instrument, identified parental withdrawing responses as one of 5 specific patterns of disrupted parental communication associated with the most serious form of insecure attachment, disorganized attachment. Withdrawing responses look like this. Your baby reaches for you, physically, emotionally, with their gaze, with their voice. And instead of meeting that reach, you step back, not harshly, not intentionally, but you are overwhelmed, or you are anxious, or you are depleted and something in you pulls away from the intensity of what your baby is bringing. Lyons-Ruth's research found that this pattern, the parent who consistently steps back when the infant moves toward them, leaves the infant in what she described as a situation of being left alone with overwhelming feeling. The baby generates distress. The distress is supposed to activate the caregiver. The caregiver withdraws instead. And the baby is left with arousal they cannot manage alone, with no one coming, and with the deeply confusing experience of the person they need most being the one least available when they most need them. Lyons-Ruth's longitudinal research tracked these infants into adolescence. The outcomes included elevated rates of dissociative symptoms, difficulty regulating emotions, and significant vulnerability to mental health challenges, all traceable, statistically, to this early pattern of maternal emotional withdrawal in infancy. What to know? If you recognize withdrawal in yourself, that recognition is already important. Withdrawal in parents often comes from their own unresolved experiences of not being met. It is not a character flaw. It is a pattern that can shift, especially with support. The most important thing you can do for your baby's attachment is get support for your own. 5. Frightened or frightening behavior, the one that surprises parents most. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning, and I want to be very careful with how I explain it because it is easy to misread, and misreading it can cause unnecessary alarm in parents who are doing nothing wrong. There is a concept in attachment research called frightened or frightening parental behavior. It was first formally identified by researchers Mary Main and Eric Hesse, and it refers to something far more specific and far more ordinary than it sounds. It does not mean parents who are violent or aggressive. It refers to moments when a parent's own unresolved fear or trauma surface is briefly in an interaction with their baby, in a way the baby's nervous system registers as alarming, even when the parent has no idea it is happening. What does this look like in ordinary life? A parent who suddenly freezes in the middle of a feeding, a parent whose face goes blank and frightened for a moment because something reminded them of something painful, a parent who, when their baby cries in a certain way, has an involuntary flashback response that makes their body go rigid. None of these are choices. None of them are intentional, but they all produce the same confusing signal for the baby's nervous system. Here is why this is so important. The attachment system in babies is designed to make them approach their caregiver whenever they feel frightened. But when the caregiver is the source of the frightening signal, even briefly, even unintentionally, the baby faces what researchers call an irresolvable conflict. They are frightened and they need their caregiver, but their caregiver is the frightening thing. They cannot approach. They cannot retreat. They are biologically stuck. This biological stuckness, when repeated, is what researchers identify as the mechanism behind disorganized attachment, the attachment style most strongly associated with later mental health difficulties, including anxiety, depression, and dissociation. Research published in multiple peer-reviewed journals confirms that even low levels of frightening parental behavior, when they occur repeatedly, are enough to disorganize the baby's attachment system. What this means for you: if you carry unresolved trauma, this is not a reason for guilt. It is a reason for support. The research is also clear that disorganized attachment is highly amenable to intervention. Parents who receive targeted support for their own unresolved experiences show measurable reductions in frightening behavior. The baby's attachment outcomes shift accordingly. Getting help for your own nervous system is an act of profound parental love. 6. The missing repair. We are 6 habits in. And I want to pause here, because if you have been recognizing yourself in any of these, if you have felt the quiet weight of seeing your own patterns named, I need to tell you something before we reach the last one. The attachment research does not say that any of these habits in isolation breaks the bond permanently. What it says is that rupture without repair is what does lasting damage, and there is an enormous difference between those two things. Every parent ruptures the attachment every single day. It is built into the reality of being a human parent, tired, distracted, imperfect, carrying your own history into every interaction. The rupture is not the problem. The missing repair is, Ed Tronick, whose still face experiment documented what happens to babies when emotional connection is suddenly withdrawn, spent the rest of his career studying something equally important. What happens when connection returns? What he found was this. When a rupture is followed by repair, when a parent misses, notices the miss, and comes back, the baby does not just return to baseline. They show a measurably positive response, a surge of engagement, of reconnection, of deepened trust that would not have been available without the rupture and repair cycle. The repair, Tronick's research showed, is not just restoration, it is construction. Every time you come back after a kit. Miss, every time you say I'm here now, I see you, I'm sorry I was somewhere else. You are teaching your baby something that cannot be taught any other way, that disconnection is not permanent, that love survives difficulty, that people can be counted on to return. That is not a small lesson. It is the lesson, and it requires you to have gotten something wrong first. What to do? After a hard moment, after you lost your patience or went blank or were somewhere else when your baby needed you, come back to it. Come back to them. You don't need to explain or apologize in any way your baby can understand. What you need is presence. The repair is made in the body, not in the words. 7. Treating your baby as your emotional support. I saved this one for last because it is the most important and the least talked about, and I want to hold it with care. There is a pattern identified in the attachment research, described by Carlin Lyons-Ruth and her colleagues at Harvard as role-confused behavior, that involves, in subtle ways, the parent turning to the infant for their own emotional regulation rather than providing regulation to the infant, not consciously, not obviously, but in specific micro-moments that the ambiance coding system was designed to identify and document. What does this look like in ordinary parenting? It looks like a parent who picks up their baby primarily when they themselves need comfort, not when the baby's signals need. It looks like a parent who becomes visibly distressed when the baby is distressed in a way that makes the baby feel the need to manage the parent's response. It looks like a parent who uses the baby as an emotional anchor during their own overwhelm, holding them, yes, but drawing from the exchange rather than giving to it. The research on this is striking. Lyons-Ruth's work found that role-confused parenting behaviors, even the subtle, non-aggressive, non-hostile versions, were significantly associated with disorganized infant attachment, and the mechanism makes complete neurological sense. The baby's attachment system is built on one foundational assumption. The caregiver is the regulated one. The caregiver is the source of calm, the provider of co-regulation, the stable presence whose nervous system the baby borrows to manage its own. When the caregiver's own emotional needs consistently reverse that direction, when the baby somehow becomes responsible for the parent's state, the entire system is inverted, and the baby, whose brain is not remotely equipped to regulate another person's emotions, is left carrying a weight that is neurologically impossible. I say this with every ounce of gentleness I have. Every parent has moments of this. Exhausted, depleted, in need of comfort, we hold our babies and feel steadier. That is not the problem. The problem is when it becomes the pattern, when the primary direction of regulation in the relationship reverses consistently. And here's the thing this research ultimately points to. The single most important investment you can make in your baby's secure attachment is your own well-being, your own healing, your own nervous system regulation. Not because why? Our baby needs a perfect parent. Because your baby needs a parent who is working on being regulated enough to be available, even imperfectly, even inconsistently, in the direction that attachment requires, from you toward them. Closing, 7 habits, reading the cry rather than the baby, inconsistency that keeps the nervous system on alert, intrusiveness that teaches the baby their signals don't matter, withdrawal that leaves them alone with what they can't manage alone. frightening behavior that creates an irresolvable conflict, the missing repair, and the quiet reversal of who is regulating whom. I want you to sit with something. Every single one of those habits comes from somewhere, from exhaustion, from your own history, from nobody ever telling you what was actually happening underneath the surface of these ordinary moments. None of them make you a bad parent. All of them make you a parent who deserves more support than most parents ever receive. The research on secure attachment is not a verdict on what you have done. It is a map of what the baby's nervous system needs. And maps are useful not because they tell you where you went wrong, but because they tell you how to get where you are trying to go. Dr. Donald Winnicott, one of the most important figures in the history of infant psychology, gave us a phrase that the research has consistently supported in the decades since he wrote it. The good enough parent. Not perfect, not always available, not without ruptures. Good enough, consistent enough, returning enough, present enough. Enough of the time to give the baby's nervous system the evidence it needs to build the prediction. The world is safe. Help comes. I matter. That prediction, built not from perfection, but from the accumulated weight of enough good moments, is secure attachment. And you are building it. Every ordinary day, in more moments than you know. If this video gave you something, a habit you'll notice now, a moment you'll repair instead of move past, a reason to get the support you deserve, share it with another parent who needs to hear it. Because the most powerful thing we can do for the next generation is not a curriculum or a class or a program. It is understanding what is actually happening inside the smallest people in our lives and choosing to respond to it with honesty, with warmth, and with the willingness to come back. I'll see you in the next one.